God shows up when you're at the end of your wisdom. God shows up when you're at the tip of your breaking point. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, the Faith Finish Her Network. My name is Victoria and I upload Christ-centered content around business, ministry, and lifestyle. So if any of that interests you, I highly suggest that you subscribe. Today's video, we're going to be diving deeper into how do you trust God's timing? And ultimately, we're going to be dissecting God's, what I like to call, final hour favor. God has a way of showing up at the very last minute or in the final hour, just as he does. And so let's get into the video. As we dive deeper into how do we trust God and trust his final hour favor, we're going to be coming from Genesis 22, verse 1 through 18. Here we have the story of God commanding Abraham to kill his only son, Isaac. So before we dissect the text and get really into it, if you don't know much about Abraham, just know Abraham was him. Abraham was that dude. His name literally means the father of the multitudes, or the father of many nations. Here in this story, we have God commanding Abraham to kill his only son, Isaac. So let's turn to Genesis chapter 22, verse 1, the easy to read version. And it says, "After these things, God decided to test Abraham's faith. God said to him, 'Abraham.' He said, 'Yes.' Then God said, 'Take your son to the land of Moriah and kill your son there as a sacrifice for me. This must be Isaac, your only son, the one you love. Use him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains there. I will tell you which mountain.'" Here we have God commanding Abraham to kill his only son, Isaac, or his only legitimate son, Isaac. Because if you go back and read Abraham's story, it's a lot. It's a lot going on. But Isaac is essentially an answered prayer for Abraham and Sarah to have a son. And Isaac was conceived well after childbearing age, if you know what I mean. I need you to go kill that son. So starting back up in verse 3, it says, "In the morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took Isaac and 2 servants with him. He cut the wood for the sacrifice. Then they went to the place where God told them to go. After they traveled 3 days, Abraham looked up, and in the distance he saw the place where they were going. Then he said to his servants, 'Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go to that place and worship. Then we will come back to you later.'" Let's stop right there. We? So knowing that Abraham has been commanded to kill his only son, Isaac, he still exercises his faith by telling his servants, "My son and I will be back." Let's keep reading in verse 6, and it says, "Abraham took the wood for the sacrifice and put it on his son's shoulder. Abraham took the special knife and fire. Then both he and his son went together to the place for worship. Isaac said to his father Abraham, 'Father.' Abraham answered, 'Yes, son.' Isaac said, 'I see the wood and the fire, but where is the lamb we will burn as a sacrifice?' Abraham answered, 'God himself is providing the lamb for the sacrifice, my son.'" Here in this portion of the text, we have another demonstration of Abraham's faith. Here we have Isaac asking his father, I see we got the wood, we got the fire, you got your knife, but where is the lamb that we're going to sacrifice? Abraham could have took that opportunity to tell Isaac, "Son, you're the lamb. You're the lamb." But he didn't. Abraham resorted in leaning into his faith that I'm not sure how God is about to give you back to me, but I know that by the end of this, we're going to walk back down that mountain. And in this portion of the text, Abraham reaffirms that God himself will provide us the lamb to sacrifice. Let's keep reading. "So both Abraham and his son went together to that place. When he came to the place where God told them to go, Abraham built an altar. He carefully laid the wood on the altar. Then he tied up his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Verse 10. Then Abraham reached for his knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord stopped him. The angel called from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. Abraham answered, Yes. The angel said, Don't kill your son or hurt him in any way. Now I can see that you do respect and obey God. I see that you are ready to kill your son, your only son, for me. Here we have the but. Here we have the B-U-T. But right as Abraham was about to fulfill the command that God gave him, there comes the but. An angel from heaven says, Hey, Abraham, stop. Don't kill your son. When God tests us, it is not about the situation that we're in. But here in verse 12, it shows why God does what he does in testing us. He wants to test to see if we will obey and essentially trust him in what doesn't make sense. Because it says, now I can see that you do respect God. You actually do obey the Lord. Okay. So through this test, even through this thing that does not make sense, you obey God. And I can see that you indeed trust God. You trust God by obeying him. You trust God by respecting him. Picking up at verse 13, it says, Then Abraham noticed a ram whose horns were caught in a bush. So Abraham went and took the ram. He offered it instead of his son as a sacrifice to God. Verse 14. So Abraham gave that place a name. The Lord provides. Even today, people say, on the mountain of the Lord, he will give us what we need. Here in this portion of the text, we have God's sovereignty. We have God's provision on full display. Here in this portion of the text, we have a manifestation of Abraham's faith, where he told Isaac earlier, God himself will provide a lamb for us to sacrifice. And here we have a ram in the bush. When you trust God, his sovereignty will show up in the substitute of a sacrifice. So instead of Isaac, God gave Abraham a ram in the bush to sacrifice. So with that, God demonstrates his final hour favor. God shows up in the final hour, y'all. God shows up when you're at the end of your wisdom. God shows up when you're at the tip of your breaking point. God shows up even in the midst of you not understanding, but you're going anyway. God shows up in the final hour. And if we keep reading, we're going to see God do even more exceedingly and abundantly. And it's what I like to call God's final hour overflow of favor. Let's read it. Verse 16 says, The angel said, You are ready to kill your only son for me. Since you did this for me, I make you this promise. I, the Lord, promise that I will surely bless you and give you as many descendants as the stars in the sky. There will be as many people as sand on the seashore. And your people will live in cities that they will take from their enemies. Every nation on the earth will be blessed through your descendants. I will do this because you obeyed me. If that's not an overflow of favor, I don't know what is. So here in trusting God and obeying his word and command when it does not make sense, not only do we have God showing up in the final hour, but we also have an overflow of favor. And it's critical as it says in verse 18, I will do this because you obeyed me. In trusting God, God rewards our obedience. So now let's talk about what can we learn from Abraham and about trusting God. The first thing, prioritize obedience over understanding. When God tells you to do something and it's contrary to your comfort, obey. Obey anyway. Obey anyway. Even if you don't understand. Because you may not understand now, but in due time you will. And the second thing that we can learn from Abraham and trusting God is that embrace the testing as growth. God doesn't just test you just to test you. Ask yourself, what is it that God needs from me in this particular situation as an opportunity for me to grow in my faith, to grow in my heart, to grow in my mind, to grow spiritually, to grow in character? What is it that God is trying to get and grow out of me in this test? So embrace the testing as growth. Abraham had so much confidence in God that he would be able to keep Isaac contrary to what God commanded. And this confidence is a demonstration of growth in faith. So embrace the testing as growth. What is it that God needs to get from you and grow out of you in the testing? And the third and final thing that we can learn from Abraham's story and trusting God is that God is always on time. Even in the final hour, y'all. God's timing is perfect because God is perfect. That's encouraging to me because each day that we're given, despite our situation, if we're not dead, God is not done. So no matter how long you've been in that situation, no matter if the walls are caving in on you right now, even though it may look like it is a point of no return, God's timing is perfect. God is not done with you yet. Just as you're about to do the very thing that God told you to do, he comes in with a but. He comes in with a final hour favor. And in this case, he comes in with a final hour overflow of favor. Because at the end of that text, God promises Abraham, I'm going to give you descendants as many as the stars that are in the sky. Do you know how many stars are in our galaxy? Do you know how many stars? You can't even count them. God promised Abraham more than just him keeping his son Isaac. He says, because you obeyed me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to overflow this, I'm going to overflow that. I'm going to have you live up to your name, a father of many nations. That's what I love about God's final hour overflow of favor. God is saying, I'm going to come through in the final hour and I'm going to overflow that thing with favor that I'm going to have you live up to your name. I'm going to come through in the final hour that you're going to have to live up to your name. You're going to have to live up to what Victoria means, victory. You're going to have to live up to what it means to be meek and humble, that the meek and humble shall what? Inherit the earth. God is overflowing with favor in the final hour that you have to live up to your name. I'm finna bless you like I named you. Woo. That's so good to me. God not only shows up in the final hour with favor, but he says, I'm about to show you why I named you what I named you. Whatever your name is, God calls you blessed. That's your name. And God is providing in the final hours with overflow of favor to the point where you have to live up to that name, blessed. Just to recap, what we can learn from Abraham's story and trusting God is that prioritize obedience over understanding, embrace testing as growth, and know that God is always on time. And with him being on time, he's going to overflow you with favor even in the final hour. That's all I have for today. I pray this video gives you some encouragement to keep pushing towards the mark, and most importantly, keep obeying God because he rewards your obedience. Also too, leave a comment down below. Have you ever felt like God was taking too long in your situation? Have you ever felt like you couldn't trust God? Has God even shown you that he shows up in the final hour? Let's continue the conversation down in the comments. So meet me there and make sure you subscribe. And remember to finish your faith, and I'll see you in the next video.